Привіт! I'm Chuck Olenek, a Ukrainian-American baptized with the name Yaroslav, and that's what everyone calls me in the Society for Creative Anachronism, where I'm Yaroslav the Persistent, or Yari to most people. I've been sharing a lot of stuff on Slavic mythology and folk tales and folklore and history and some of the culture. And I decided that since we are in the throes of winter and this weekend much of the US and Canada is going to get pummeled by cold weather, not anywhere near as bad as Ukraine and Russia, but still, you can't help but think about keeping warm. So I'm going to tell you how in period the Ukrainians and Belarusians and Russians did it. They had something called a Pich. Before I can explain the Pich, I need to explain the typical farmhouse. The Russians called it an Izba, which is going to be the more familiar word if you read a lot of folklore. The Russian Izba would often be made from locally cut, rough-hewn logs fitted together using a hand axe. Coins, wool, and frankincense were customarily placed beneath the corners of the house to make the people living there healthy and wealthy. Ukrainians, Belarusians, and Polish peasants, their dwelling was called a Khata. Often it was made of wattle and daub construction, and the plastering inside and out would be whitened, and then often designs would be painted on them. Ukrainians would build a steep thatched roof fashioned of rye straw because, hey, ease of construction, low cost of materials, and durability. Some of these roofs were supposed to last like 50 years. The typical Khata would have a rectangular plan and there'd be two rooms. The Mala Khata, that's the little house, and the Velika Khata, that's the big house. The Velika Khata, that was the larger of the two rooms, and that was accorded a special status, and there was the east wall of the room that had a red or beautiful corner where shrines used to be in pagan times, and then later icons were put up during the Christian era, and they had embroidered linens around them called rushniks, and there were arrangements of dried flowers, and the room was traditionally used only for special occasions or for the reception and accommodation of guests. Think about those houses that had plastic covering the furniture, okay? That'll kind of give you the feel. All right, we're concerned with the other room, the Malachata, the smaller one. This was the family workroom, and that was basically the hub of activity occurring there. So there's cooking and there's washing and eating and sleeping, and it's in the Malachata, that's where the traditional massive cook stove or Pich was located. These stoves would combine the functions of a traditional stove or oven or fireplace into one single unit, and it'd serve a broad range of purposes, including cooking, so you're boiling, you're baking, you're smoking, you're drying plants out and mushrooms out, and it's providing interior heating and ventilation. Traditionally, the Pich was placed in the center of the Khata or Izba in order to evenly heat the two rooms, and so that the heat was not going to be drawn through the windows and doors. They usually started off white, but painting and decoration would be added later. The builders of Russian stoves that were referred to as pechniki, or stove makers, I would imagine it'd probably be a similar word in Ukrainian. And good ones, good stove makers, always had a high status among the population. Hey, you got a badly built stove, badly built Pich, it might be difficult to repair, it might bake unevenly, or it might smoke, it might retain the heat poorly. And you need this to survive. Because of the construction, the Pich is going to retain heat for long periods of time. The smoke is channeled out, and hot air that's produced by combustion that's going to go through a really complex labyrinth of passages, and it's going to warm the bricks of which the stove is constructed. And you would also have a couple of different designs. One variant might have two hearths. One is for mainly cooking food quickly. The other is mainly for heating in the winter. And that's going to bring us to one of the other purposes of the Pich. It provided a warm place to sleep. The place to sleep was called the polot. In other words, there would be these shelves on which the people slept. Places to sleep were built in two levels. Adults usually slept on the first level, children on the second. There was enough space for up to 6 people. On the left of this picture, you can see steps going up to a level atop the Pich, and on the right, besides the tools in the corner, you see the chimney in the upper right-hand corner. Once you learn this, all of a sudden it's going to make clear this scene in the movie Taras Bulba, where Andrei and Ostap, the sons of Taras, they are going to be made Cossacks, and they're brought before the starets, the elder, and he's, obviously like older than dirt, and he's addressing Andrei and Ostap and telling them, I do not want to die sitting on an oven. Now you two start some fighting and let an old Cossack die the way he should in battle. As a kid, I was trying to figure this out. Like, why is he talking about sitting on an oven? Now I get it. All right, the Pich. It's a lot like the banya or the bathhouse or steam house. It's got a real powerful magical aura, just like the banya. The banya has a little creature living there called the banik. I've talked about him before. The stove here, the Pich, that's the spiritual center of the house, right? And the ancestors are dwelling in the Pich, and that's making the family stove a sacred fire, and it's worthy of honor in its own right. And you weren't ever supposed to whistle in the house when the Pich was lit, which evidently my dad followed that belief, but he didn't, even though it was just a gas stove. But when I whistled in the kitchen once, I got hit for it. And it never was explained other than, you do not do that. All right. I mentioned a spirit living in the bathhouse. There's one in the Pich. We got to cover this guy. As I said, the Pich has a resident. In folk belief, the Domovik, the Russians say Domovoi, literally one of the household, and that's probably going to be the name that you'll run into if you read a lot of folklore. The Domovik is connected to the ancestors. He's believed to protect the well-being of kin in any of its aspects, being very protective towards the children and the animals of the household, constantly looking after them, and it shares in the joys and sorrows of the family, and it's able to foretell the future and warn of future events, such as the imminent death of a kindred person, or plagues or wars, other bad stuff that threaten the welfare of the kin. It's very rare that you see the Domovik, but he's active at night. If you do happen to see him, he might show up as a gray-bearded old man with flashing eyes, and he's covered from head to toe with tangled hair. Sometimes he's in the guise of the master of the house, or maybe some departed family member, who might sport a tail and little horns. I think that latter comment or description came about because of Christianity and trying to demonize all this stuff. The Domovik might choose to manifest itself as a cat, a dog, a bear. I think you would notice that in the house. And in some traditions, maybe a snake. Whatever you do, You never address the Domovik directly or to talk about the Domovik. He doesn't like that. You might refer to him as Did or Didko. It's grandfather in Ukrainian. I just had an epiphany when my mom would talk about devils. She'd refer to Didko. Actually, so would my dad. Wow. Ooh, an epiphany, and you just got to see it. Okay. The Russians might call him Little Master, or if he's in his snake form, they might call him Zmek. Sometimes he's given a proper name or a diminutive. He is a good choice. The little fellow. And the Domovik is able to hear whispers, and he hates loud noises. If his favorite food is not left out for him, expect some stuff is going to get busted. Things might get hidden away. And I had mentioned this before when I'd mentioned the little fellow. It was a weird epiphany when I was figuring this out. Like, my mom used to always leave apples and bread on the table. There was apples, bread, and salt, always. And, didn't matter the time of year. Those would be out there. And I just thought she was, being mom. Making sure that the family would be fed. All right. So, that kind of sums up the history of the Pich and the cultural, values attached to it. Okay, you got a little bit of mythology. These are just some thoughts to keep you warm while winter is running amok outside. So until the next time, do побачення.